Hello, I'm back. I'm back. Welcome to episode 7 of the podcast. And the sun is shining. It's been 3 days of warm sunlight here in the UK, and I'm happy about it. I've tanned a little bit, feel nice. But yeah, it's so nice to be back. Welcome to episode 7. A lot has happened since we last spoke. I went back into the studio with Cassell, the beat maker, to continue working on the album. We started working on a bunch of new songs, as well as finishing off some of our other songs that we started for the project. And it's starting to kind of all come together. We had some great revelations and discovered some really cool stuff. And it was just lovely to spend 3 days making music. And I'm about to go into another week of recordings. And so I wanted to touch base and talk about something that happened this week and something that's been on my mind, which led to a brand new song. If you've ever seen my live show before, you'll know that one of the things I talk about is that I was a closeted kid who got a crush on my male friend in my very strict Catholic school. And it's the introduction that I use to go into the poem Desire, which leads into the song Sleeping on My Own, which is about that crush. A poem that I sort of adapted out of an old poetry book that I'd started when I was 16 years old. And it was a book that had been given to me by an English teacher to continue writing poems, because I'd been writing poems in my orange book, which is a book that is like handed into the examiner, and you're definitely not supposed to doodle and write notes and poetry in the back of it. And there's a moment in the poem that, although it's very true, I always get a little bit nervous about doing. The poem says, Desire. Now I know why they call it a fire. In this heat I perspire, 'cause I hold a flame and stoke it unspokenly. When you catch my gaze, takes a whole lot of weight. Will you be my cliche? My door open, shirt soaked in the pouring rain, me on your doorstep in my smoldering shame, burning with something to say. Call you by my name. See, it's right there on the tip of my tongue, but I've got God words written by man on my brain. They infer this inferno belongs to Dante, so I kneel and I feel I can pray it away, and yet here in my heart you remain. My heaven, my saint. So much to lose, so much to gain, going round in circles again. Desire is a poem that speaks to the pain and the longing and the fear that comes with being a closeted kid in a Catholic school with a crush on your male friend. And I always get a little bit nervous about that poem. It brings up a lot of emotions every time I do it. And the emotions never seem to change, no matter how much I do it, because it just holds so much weight. And this week I was performing, supporting Harry Baker, and his set was in a church, a beautiful church in Sheffield. And there was something, I have to say, beautiful and also a little bit unsettling about doing that poem in a church. Admittedly, not in a service, but in a church. But what I've noticed is every so often, it doesn't happen all the time, but when I do that poem, sometimes there can be a well-meaning person who is religious. They might be Christian, they might be one of the other many organized religions, but they come up to me with love, real love, and they say, Jesus loves you, or, God loves you though. And I know it's being said to kind of give me a spiritual, positive energy, maybe in response to a fear that I've been given a spiritual rejection by somebody else from that organized religion. And so they're trying to, say it is the equivalent, I guess, of saying, we're not all like this, maybe. And it happened at this gig. A very lovely person walked up to me and said, God bless you. And I really loved your poem. And I loved your performance. And I could tell she wanted to say so much more, and it wasn't really an environment. But it kind of got me thinking about that poem and about that song and about doing the gigs. Because if I'm being honest, the biggest fear for me, or the thing that would make me really sad, is if people would see my show and see the set and think that I was anti-religion, or that I was anti-spirituality or anti-God. I'm not anti any of those things. not in and of themselves. First of all, I consider myself to be very, very spiritual. And it's something that I've only just started really talking about, but I really believe, we're all connected in the great circle of life, and the universe, God, and powers that be, I just feel run through everything. And it doesn't need to be over explained, but I do feel that, if you want to connect to that, it's there. That's how I feel. And although there is no doubt about it, there are some people who use religious texts and doctrines to justify rejecting other human beings, dehumanizing other human beings, or worse, implying a spiritual rejection is incoming from the powers that be because of who they are, even if who they are is beyond their control. Although those people do exist, I think it's wrong to only talk about those people and not also recognize that religious groups have been some of the most proactive people in supporting those who are struggling to be housed, those who are struggling to eat, those who are struggling with addiction, those who are struggling with their mental health. Where governments and private companies and celebrities have failed, organized religion has, it's unavoidable, and it should be recognized, has at times stepped in greatly positively impactful ways, consistently, to make the world a better place for those people who really need that support. And I'm saying that to say this. I don't believe in good and evil in and of itself, black and white. And so it sort of sat with me, even though this person approached me with such positivity, that I was like, oh, I really want us to get to a place as a society. I would love it. I don't know how we're going to do it, by the way, but I would love it if we could get to a place where we can just have room for humanity. Just all of the different colors and shades and flavors of humanity that there are. If we could just figure it out. And it's going to need some juggling because we made society and we're flawed. Like, we've made it. We're discovering all the things that are wrong with the thing we've made up. And hopefully we can adjust it to make room for human nature, for nature in general. And my final argument is, if you believe God's making nature, then surely we should be adapting the stuff we make, the books we write, so that they accommodate for that nature. I had a lovely time doing this gig. It was so beautiful. Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful. And the audience sang I'll Be Around. They sang Belief. And audiences always sing along, but this room of people, they were just giving something. I could feel the energy in the room and it was so beautiful. And I'm smiling just remembering it. It was a really beautiful show. Thank you, Harry, for having me. Hugh, who was the vicar who ran the church and sort of hosted the opening of the event, and they put on lots of events there at the church, was just so lovely and welcoming. And after my set, came up and praised the set and praised my sort of story around desire and sleeping on my own. He actually made me think of a story that I've not thought about in a while that I wanted to tell you about, because it kind of led to one of the songs that I'm working on the album at the moment. And it's the story of the first vicar that I ever came out to. When I was a student and I started coming out and I was 19, I was working in a sci-fi cult film theme bar called Fab in Leeds. And one of the patrons there was a vicar called Ben, who was just the loveliest guy. He'd come in at 5 o'clock, he'd have a pint, he'd chat, and he'd leave. And he got talking to me, and he obviously found out that I was a singer and that I liked music. And he asked me, who got you singing? And I was like, well, I've always been singing. I was like, but some of my earliest memories of singing are with my grandma, my maternal grandma, Eudora. She used to put me on her coffee table when I was a kid and have me sing to her. And I was singing all the time. I always want records putting on. She'd put them on so I could just dance around the front room singing. And she passed away when I was 6. It was my first experience of losing somebody very close. And I was 6, so I don't have loads and loads of memories, but my memories of her are very strong. Ben, when I was speaking to Ben in Fab Cafe, he was asking me about, my family and religion. And, one of the things that I, at the time, really didn't know was, how my family, especially the members of my family that were Catholic, how they would take the information if I told them And my grandma had obviously passed away, but I also at the time was wondering, I wonder what she would say if she was here. I wonder what her reaction would be and how she would handle it and what she would say. And Ben was very, positive and affirmative, and he was asking about her, more questions about my grandma. And I was telling him that she was very religious. Her house was like a shrine. There was religious memorabilia, paraphernalia everywhere, like many Catholic Caribbean families. There was a holographic Jesus on the wall that like knocked at the door with the quote, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." There was a sign above the front door. When you walked in through the front door, there was a sign that said, "Christ is the head of this house." She had praying hands, salt and pepper shakers. And so, yeah, she was 10 toes down for Jesus, let me tell you. And as I was telling him about this house, I recalled something that I'd never spoken about. And I said, you know what? She used to have in her bedroom a poem or like a story on the wall. And it was about somebody walking down a beach and God saying that they carried them through hard times or something. I was like, I don't remember it. I was so young. But I really remember that poster, what it looked like. And it had like a beach and sand and a setting sun. And it was beautiful. I remember it's the only real thing I really remember about her bedroom was that poster. And Ben just sort of quietly nodded and let me carry on telling stories. And that was that. Anyway, the next shift that I had 2 days later on a Saturday, I came in and my manager, Colette, said, somebody's left you an envelope. And it had my name on it. I opened the envelope and there was a card inside with a small note wrapped around it. And on the card, it had a picture on one side of a beach with sand and a setting sun. And on the other side, it had a short story called Footprints. And it was the story from my grandma's bedroom. A story of a person at the end of their life, seeing their life laid out along a beach and footprints in the sand for each moment. And they see that during some of the hardest times that there were only one set of footprints, and the person turns to God or to Jesus and says, "What's the deal? Why, in the hardest moments of my life, did you abandon me?" And God, Jesus says, "I would never abandon you. In those moments of your life where you see only one set of footprints, it's then when I carried you." And I stood there in the middle of the busy bar with my jaw open reading this thing. And then I read the note and it just said, "Sorry, I couldn't get you a poster-sized one." And I obviously knew it had come from Ben. And something in me in that moment, in reading that and thinking about my grandma and the kindness of this person from the church, made me feel on some level like it was kind of a nod or a salute from God, from my grandma, from the universe in some way. That kind people really are all around. And it doesn't matter what their religion is. It doesn't matter what books they read to make sense of the world for themselves. It matters what they go out and do with that. How they use their doctrine or their belief system or their perspective of the world to enact upon the world their wills and what they believe is right. And so people who are speaking against human beings, if that is what is within them and their intention, they'll find a way to do that, whether they've got a quote about it or not. And equally, people who want to do good, who understand that there needs to be room for all human beings, all nature, they'll find a way to do that, no matter what's written in their books and no matter who teaches them. I carry that card around in my wallet to this day. This is my wallet, and somewhere is the card. There it is. There's the beach and the setting sun. It's called Footprints. That's the story. And this is me. I have had this card. It's in excellent nick because I never take it out of my wallet. I have had this card for, I guess, 17 years. And I carry it with me everywhere I go. For me, it's both carrying around a reminder of God, the universe, the powers that be's ability to turn up and show up when you really, really need it to. But also it's a reminder for me of my grandma and the power of good people. And so at the end of this week, I started writing a poem and writing a piece for those people. in our lives. I really enjoyed supporting Harry Baker. I loved the show, and it's put me in such a beautiful headspace to go into the studio this week. So I'm excited to get writing. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. It felt like a pivotal moment to share it. And I hope you also have a beautiful start to the week. I don't have a good book quote this week, but maybe if you're up for it, you can Google Footprints. I don't know who the author is, it's just called Footprints, and have a little read. Maybe it will put you in a good headspace. And I'll see you next time.